Hello chums, Robert Ross here in Comedy Cottage, wishing you a very happy Easter Monday. I hope you've got some chocolate left. I bet you haven't, you little piggies. Anyway, delicious times yesterday. First up is tomorrow's pick of Talking Pictures TV. We always do this the day before because sometimes it's early morning or lunchtime before we upload our film, you see. That's the method in our madness. Tomorrow's is at 1:50 p.m. and it's a gorgeous Ealing comedy thriller called Saloon Bar. And my good mate Alan Coles a few days ago on Twitter challenged a few of his pals to pick a pub you'd like to walk into in terms of film or TV show. And one of mine is definitely the Saloon Bar. It's a pub called the Cap and Bell. And it's actually at Christmas time, which is a bit strange for Easter viewing, but never mind, go with it, it's really good. Stars that wonderful old character actor Gordon Harker, and basically they solve a murder mystery in a pub. What's not to like? So that's 1:50 on Talking Pictures TV tomorrow. It's a joy. Of course, still in an absolute whirl over the loss of Tim Brooke-Taylor. I was looking at some social media last night, which I shouldn't have done because it upset me a lot. But the outpouring of love for this man was beautiful. So you're all lovely people, and we will miss Tim horrendously. I was just thinking about all the stuff he did. Obviously, I was on about the goodies yesterday. The goodies is the thing I used to love as a kid. And I had a signed photograph. I'm sure my sister would have sent this letter because she was sending out fan letters long before I started doing it. So when I was about 7, I think I got a signed picture of all 3 of the goodies, which I still treasure, up in the vault somewhere. And I remember talking to Tim, like Bill and Graham, he had a passion for cartoons. And if you watch the goodies, you'll see a lot of visual references to the Tom and Jerry cartoons and loads of Bugs Bunny stuff in there. And Tim did a lot of cartoon work. Obviously the 3 of them did the voices for Banana Man, which was a joy in the early 80s. He did all the voices for a thing I loved called Gideon, Gideon the Duck. And I wrote another fan letter to Tim around about that time, which I think I would have been about 10 or 11, I'm thinking around that time. And I wrote him a fan letter to say how much I loved the show and could I get a signed photograph and could Gideon sign it too. And Tim, being the absolute sweetheart, sent me a lovely signed photograph back, and on the back of it, I still have this, it's one of my treasures. Tim has beautifully put on the back of it that Gideon sends his love but can't sign his autograph because it finds it very hard to hold a pen in his web feet, which I thought was absolute delight to keep that magic of a child. You know, I'm still a child really, but to keep that magic of a child alive, I thought that was a very sweet thing. And I did remind him about that a year or 2 ago, which he seemed to remember. Bless him, he probably didn't. But he was lovely like that. And of course, also in the mid-80s, he presented a Channel 4 thing called Cartoon Alphabet. Now, along with Derek Griffiths and Film Fun, remember that, which was lovely, around the same sort of time. Tim's was like a sort of a friendly school teacher. I mean, that was my animation education, really, Cartoon Alphabet. It was brilliant, and I think for the first time I saw stuff like Gerald McBoing Boing, the Oscar-winning cartoon, and these wonderful old things like Gertie the Dinosaur. I saw these things for the first time because of that show that Tim presented, so it meant a lot to me, and I did, thankfully again, have an opportunity to thank him for that show. It was a great show. I wrote this book. I was trying to work out when I first met Tim yesterday, and it was hidden in plain view, because I wrote this book, it was published in 2000, called The Complete Goodies, a B.T. Batsford book. And allow me please to wallow, because there's a forward by all 3 goodies here. I've got a £20 note, it's a bookmark, look at that. Tim would love that. But it's a wonderfully long introduction that Tim wrote, and I'm going to read it for you because it's interesting. It says, Robert Ross first swam into my ken when he asked me to be the patron of a comedy magazine I had admired. That was Core. It wasn't the most beautifully produced magazine, harsh but true, thanks Tim, but it was obviously put together by someone who cared about comedy, all types of comedy. And what was so great was that he didn't come with all sorts of misconceptions and preconceptions. If it made him laugh, that was all that mattered. He liked new stand-ups, carry-ons, Monty Python, and above all, the goodies. Excellent chap, he writes. There was one slight worry. He knew too much. Was he following us? Were we bugged? Or even worse, was he a comedy anorak who had amassed facts for the sake of it, but had no actual sense of humour? It was therefore with some trepidation that I agreed to be interviewed by him at the Theatre Royal Windsor. Now that's it, you see. Now my good mate Rick Blackman's dad, the late Christopher Beanie, was in this production of Aladdin in 1997. So that's when I first met Tim. Thank you for that, Tim. I'd forgotten about that until I read this again, where I was doing pantomime. And what a shock. No anorak by any means, instead a good-looking, thank you, sparky young fella who quite clearly loved comedy. It is true that the interview didn't appear in print for a year, but no one's perfect. That's also true. Sorry, Tim. The Goodies hasn't really been shown in the UK properly since the early 80s, although there have been recent noises from the BBC which might put this right. Alas, there's only a few in the early 2000s? So BBC, please, come on. If it takes Tim going, put some Goodies on. We all need them at the moment. So when he contacted me to say he was doing a Goodies book, I metaphorically patted him on the head and murmured something along the lines of, "In your dreams, mate." But he's done it, and it's frightening. He has uncovered things that I had forgotten, things that were probably best forgotten. There's no hiding now, and I'd no idea that Bill and Graham were doing so many things behind my back. But what is so flattering is that he chose to do it at all, and saved me many hours rummaging around in the attic. Anyway, I hope the reader is as interested as I am. It's all here except my inside leg measurement, and for the record, Robert, and the second edition, you might as well know it's 29 inches. So Graham and Bill have also done some quite pithy comments as well at the bottom there, so you have to buy the book to read those. And on the day we launched this at the National Film Theatre, which was a sellout gig, we were put in the MoMI, the old MoMI space at NFT3, and that sold out, I think my good friend Dick Philly told me, in about half an hour. And they moved us to NFT1, which is the big space, which sold out, I think, in about 2 hours. I think he told me we even outsold in terms of speed Elizabeth Taylor when she was there a few years earlier. But anyway, they've all signed it on that day. It was the last day of my 20s. And Tim has signed Rob, many underlined again, thanks, Tim Brooke-Taylor, you're a toff. And Graham has written to Robert with love, with thanks and goody wishes, Graham. And Bill has put, typical Bill, and I was trying to forget. Oh, thanks very much, Bill Oddie. So that's that. We will do a book club about that or my other Goodies book at some point. Not yet, obviously it's a bit too soon to talk about Tim in that live way. But we are doing the next book club this coming Tuesday. That's tomorrow, isn't it? Which is the revisit of the Carry On Companion, because you had so many lovely questions we couldn't fit them all in that 1 hour last week. So from 7 o'clock on my Comedy Historian Facebook page, we're doing Mark 2 of the Carry On Companion. So please join us for that, 7 o'clock till 8 o'clock. Get your questions about that particular book, and I'll do my best to answer them. And I was just thinking again about Tim. He would love to be part of this because he loved a good endorsement and a good promotion. So we got so many lovely viewers yesterday watching the film about Tim, and it was very hard for me to do that one, obviously. I'm sure it came across, and it's still hard to talk about him. But if the 1,000th subscriber, we're about 130 or something at the moment, but if a 1,000th subscriber comes along, there will be a Tim-centric prize for the 1,000th subscriber. And if you assist, if you tell your friends and you put this into your Twitter account or your social media, other social media accounts, and you're the person whose friend is the 1,000th, you'll get a prize as well, okay? Because I'm feeling generous as it's Easter. So that's that. So tell your friends, subscribe with a little button there, because we're going to do this every day until we get out of this mad crisis. But just one last thing about Tim. As I mentioned before yesterday, the Bristol Slapstick. Tim was working tirelessly through January. He was touring the country in a tour of I'm Sorry, I Haven't a Clue. And he had 2 days off the tour, and he chose to take those 2 days off to go down to Bristol to support Chris Daniels and the guys at Bristol Slapstick to do that 2 days. And he did 4 shows to my knowledge. He did a revival with my good pal Barnaby Eaton-Jones of I'm Sorry, I'll Read That Again, with Graham and Bill, of course. He did the 50th anniversary of the Goodies, which Robin Ince introduced with Graham and Bill again, of course. He did a show with Rob Brydent, celebrating I'm Sorry, I Haven't a Clue, with Baz and Gray and Colin Sell at the piano, of course. And he also did, celebrating a thing even before all those shows, he did a solo show interviewed by Robin Ince about At Last, the 1948 show. And it was just after Neil Innes had sadly passed away, and literally days after Terry Jones had passed away. So after I saw Tim do that lovely celebration at Last, the 1948 show, I went up to him and gave him a huge hug and said, Tim, you know I love you, don't you? And he pulled away with a slight concerned face, and he sort of, oh, I get it. And he hugged me back and said, I love you too. So please, do me a favour, call your loved ones, call your friends, call your family, tell them you love them, because they'll appreciate it. Okay, until the next time, I love you too. See you soon.